Hello, welcome everybody to week two of Rob's favorite movies at reserved seating. And we are talking about David Lynch's Mulholland Drive, which was my first David Lynch movie that I had ever seen. I saw bits and pieces of Wild at Heart and Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me on cable, but never sat down to watch a full movie. I had not seen the Twin Peaks television show, so Mulholland Drive holds a special place for me, but it holds an even more special place for you, Rob, because it's one of your favorite movies.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm actually, now that you mentioned it, I'm trying to decide if this was my first David Lynch film or not. I know it was the first film I saw where I knew it was David Lynch and I knew who David Lynch was. I'm almost positive I saw Dune first, though, because my friends and I were Dune kids. We loved the book, and I know for a fact that we probably saw that movie, but I wasn't drawing that connection then, knowing it was David Lynch. And it's Dune is also a very different film in his filmography. This was like early college, like film school Rob type stuff. A friend of mine, we used to, after work, we used to both work for UPS on the twilight shift. We used to work in the early evenings, and then lots of times during school, we would come home and we'd go back to his house afterwards, and we would watch movies. And it was a time where like all of my friends were pretty into, like, quote unquote weird movies. But Vito and I were the two who really were into like foreign films. Like we just got more esoteric with it. We were sort of into filmmakers. Like, long story short was that Mulholland Drive was the first Lynch film I saw where we knew, we watched it and we said like, oh, that was something really different. That was something really strange, odd in its performances. It was sort of, in some ways very like sort of arch and performative. In some ways it was really dark, and but it was a different kind of darkness than we'd ever seen before. It wasn't like, we were really into like John Waters at the time, so we knew like the gross out stuff, and we were into like Chungking Express and those kinds of movies. So we knew those sort of romances. But this was such an interesting mix between the two. And it's something that still, when I watch it, I'm amazed that it's a movie. Like I'm just amazed that
Mhm.
Lynch, got away with making it, which he, kind of didn't, right? If we don't have to dig too much into it, but originally the idea was that it was this sort of pilot that got denied, and then he added some more scenes and made it into a film. But no, the movie means the world to me. It's my favorite Lynch film, and Lynch is my favorite filmmaker. So it was really important to me growing up, and it's something I've watched a ton, and just rewatching it again, still finding new things about it.
It became kind of a little movie obsession for me for a little while. I saw it when I was a college student. They used to have a series at the Memorial Union every Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. And they would get, it was sort of like a second run type of situation where it would be a movie that played 3, 4 months ago. And then I always loved seeing it there because it would be like my second chance to see a lot of movies. But in particular, when I was in college, it was really the only way for me to see art house movies, because I didn't have a car and like we didn't have a theater on campus other than like the ones that were sponsored by the school. So I heard about Mulholland Drive. Roger Ebert was a huge fan of it. It was on his top 10 list. And that was more than enough for me to want to go seek it out. And then when I watched it, it was, I've always been good about mood movies. Like I don't really care too much normally about plot. Like if it's got characters that I care about and it puts me on an emotional experience or just kind of a vibe, I find my way into the movies really easily, even though I don't necessarily understand what was going on.
Right.
Mulholland Drive is my favorite example of that kind of movie, and then also my favorite example of a puzzle type of movie because it's the type of movie that, on first viewing, I don't know about you, but like I don't think a viewer stands a chance of understanding everything that's going on.
No.
But it's the type of movie that rewards you for doing research about it because the answers are interesting. It's not a sense where it's like, oh, what I came up with is more interesting than what's like really going on. I think what's really going on is more interesting probably than what I could come up with. And then also, it's so good in the sense that it's so emotionally affecting that once you know the mystery and once you know kind of the ins and outs, it's still a rewarding experience. It's
Right.
still something that you can go back to. It's never something where you feel like, oh, I cracked it. I don't need, there's nothing left for me in it. It always feels like there's something left for you to discover in it. So just a real quick example, like this time, I knew this already, but I was like really focused on Naomi Watts's wanting to humiliate Justin Theroux throughout all of her recollections of him or like imaginings of him. And I found that so interesting to watch this time. But that's not something that I take away most of the time. Sometimes it's an entirely the Naomi Watts show. Sometimes it's all about the David Lynch of it all. Sometimes it's about the non sequiturs of dream logic and everything like that. So it's a great movie from just you take out of it whatever you want to take out of it.
It's a puzzle movie, but as you said, like you don't Lynch is never going to tell you, yes, this is what it's about and this is what
Yeah.
it means. Like you're not going to get one there's like ending explained, like you, even though I'm sure there's 1,000 of them out there, but like
Yeah.
the point is never that with Lynch. And as I said on the Wild at Heart episode recently with Patrick, like David Lynch isn't trying to trick you. He's just trying to get you to feel something.
Mm-hmm.
He's just trying to get you to understand the headspace he's in. And for this, as you said before, I mean, the movie, this one to me though is very clearly. I mean, not to say that there's a canon interpretation of it, but it's very clearly like Naomi Watts falls asleep, she has a dream, she wakes up, and then we get to see what the real reality of her life was, and then we can go
Yeah.
back the second time and see how she's interpreted. So, like you said, like the Justin Theroux character, is someone in real life who we see ends up humiliating her. So in the dream, he's being humiliated, right? Billy, I was gonna say Billy Bob Thornton.
Yeah.
The Billy Ray Cyrus scene, which is
Yeah.
great, everything like that. And when, as you said, it's so much about like this is such good Lynch because um, this is how things feel in dreams. This is I don't remember where I first heard it, but I've always been of the opinion that like our dreams are our brains trying to work something out. Our brain,
Yeah.
we consistently dream about certain things because they're sources of pain for us, or they're sources of trouble or joy or whatever. And it's sort of a problem that we're trying to figure out. And obviously, in this particular instance, Diane Sullivan is someone who was hurt very badly by someone, and was subsequently humiliated by them, and does this terrible thing, makes this terrible choice. Not to spoil all of Mulholland Drive for you, although at this point you should really watch Mulholland Drive, I think.
Mhm.
But and then we get to see, in reverse order, we get to see how her mind is coping with it, how her brain is protecting her from it, but then also how it gets so intense that her brain can't do it anymore. And I think that's just such a, I hate to use the word Lynchian, but it's such a Lynchian thing. It's such a Lynchian idea. And the way our brain displaces things, the way our brain displaces emotions. And, you can have a scene, like there's the Patrick Flisher scene. I think I'm saying his name correctly. Yeah. At the diner, the Winky's Diner scene, and it's one of the most haunting scenes I've ever seen in a movie. It's something that still gives me, the man behind Winkies is something that still disturbs me a lot. But then when you look at it in the context of real Diane's dream, he's just somebody who looked at her wrong in the diner while she was feeling guilty about herself. You know what I mean? It's just like she makes this terrible decision. She looks over, she sees a guy standing by the diner, over by the counter. And then how does she displace that in her dream? She makes him the
Yeah.
one who has anxiety. And just like little things that, again, once you just kind of, I hate to say unlock, because I just think that term gets used too much on the internet, but like once you just get that little literal blue key into this movie and you're like, oh, all of this is just her brain protecting her from her emotions. And it's just such a, I just think it's a beautiful, romantic, sad movie that just gets me in different ways every time.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think it's so resonant because it's so sad. It's a really affecting tragedy. And I like that Lynch understands guilt in a way that I think a lot of more conventional movies don't. Because I think like if somebody commits a murder or like hires somebody to put a hit on somebody in a more conventional movie, they are afraid of getting caught,
Right.
or they're like trying to cover their tracks about like a crime. But like I like to think it's probably a lot more like how Naomi Watts is doing, where it's just like if you're not prepared for all of the ramifications of it, and how could you be? You don't know until you know. Like you're just shut down. Like
Yeah.
there's nothing you can do. You're just like a husk of a person at that point. So I find that really interesting. And then also with dreams, I am really interested in, I think most people are interested in like what do dreams mean? And the most concise thing I ever heard about dreams is two things. One is that they always represent something that you want or something that you're afraid of.
Hmm.
And then everybody talking in your dream is you talking to yourself.
Right.
So like when I was watching this movie, it's not note for note, but like almost all the dialogue, whether it comes from Justin Theroux or like the William Sadler looking cowboy or like whomever, is her subconscious talking to herself in some way.
I love the way that she makes the detectives in her mind. The detectives are these incompetent guys, but one of them is Robert Forster, right, who rules.
Yeah.
Um, I love that the thing she's most afraid of is that it works. The things she's most afraid of is that it's successful because she doesn't want to kill Camilla. She wants her to come back to her. She wants her
Mhm.
to, be sorry and all that stuff. And she hopes it goes wrong. And there's always that little thing in our brains, like we hope that our little plans,
Yeah.
fail, or, we hope that things work out the way we want them to, or whatever. Like this is just such a wonderful way to dramatize that.
Yeah, actually three things. One is I think that, and I'm just speaking from my experience, but if you're maybe unsure of where to enter David Lynch's filmography, I think Mulholland Drive is a really good movie to start with.
Sure.
Because I think that in a lot of ways, even though it's tricky the first time you see it, I think it's very accessible in terms of it's really kind of just not in quotation marks if you
Yeah.
kind of just follow the characters. Like if you follow the characters and the emotional honesty of it, I think it's really accessible. Um, Another thing is this is the Naomi Watts performance I've been chasing ever since Mulholland Drive. I don't want to, complain about an actor whose performance I think is like this is one of the best performances of the 2000s, and I'm just always chasing this, and I maybe Lynch sees something in her and taps into it more so than I think maybe she's a letter perfect actor, because I think she's very performative in a lot of other things, and I don't think it always works. But I just am always chasing Mulholland Drive with her. And then also, this comes from the Roger Ebert review. He did a great movies essay about it also, but he also calls out that this movie is very sexy and that this movie feels like it was made in the 70s. And he says, in his words, at a time when audiences like seeing sex, like in movies. And I was just like, yes, exactly. And it's so sexy because it's so romantic.
Yeah.
Like, it's so, you know, a woman looking for a connection, and like when she has it and stuff, you could tell it like means so much to her, and that's what makes it sexy. It's not just titillating, it's like really romantic and swoony and stuff like that. And that's why that scene in the Silencio club is so moving, because it just looks like this kind of earth shattering confluence of like everything. It's
Yeah.
such a good movie. Yeah.
I was going back and looking at this isn't in the Criterion DVD, but I remember in my original DVD there was that insert that Lynch put in there, and it was like 10 clues to unlocking the movie. Do you remember that? Do you remember
I
seeing that?
do. I don't. I think it was more just like a joke,
And they're
because once
all
you,
kind of he's kind of
yeah,
messing with you a little bit. Yeah, yeah.
exactly, yeah. Well, do you remember the other thing that he did with the DVD? That was kind of a practical joke.
He cut out chapter stops. Yeah,
Exactly. He's not rewarding the. He's gonna make you work for
it's
it if
going to
that's
make
why
you
you're
work for it.
going to the
Yeah.
movie. So this is your favorite Lynch movie. If you had to say like what rounds out a top three or even a top five, what other movies would you say
Yeah, I
are in
mean,
there?
I honestly don't. I know I just talked about this with Patrick, but Mulholland Drive would be number one for me. Blue Velvet would be up there in the top three. Um, and I think Fire Walk with Me, just because I'm such a Twin Peaks guy,
Mhm.
and that movie is it's such a beautiful, sad. I mean, it really, but there's a lot of similarities to Mulholland Drive in this. I know we frequently talk about Lost Highway. I know a lot of times with Lynch, there's the discussion that Lost Highway is kind of his warm up for Mulholland Drive because it's kind of similar. It's about like dual identities and things like that. But I think Fire Walk with Me is similar as well, because you're sort of walking through this dreamscape with this very, very damaged person
Yeah.
who embodies all these American ideals and stuff. And so I think for me, having just rewatched Twin Peaks all the way through, I think that that would probably be my three. But again, if I'm watching a David Lynch film, I'm happy, so I could choose any of them at any time.
My top three are Mulholland Drive, Lost Highway, and then depending on my mood, it would be either Wild at Heart or Blue Velvet as
Yeah.
three. Um, my question is, I've never seen Twin Peaks, the television series. I think the thing that would drive me to it the most is like I really love like Machen Amick.
Yeah.
Um, so is the show fun, or is it like Fire Walk with Me, where Fire Walk with Me I would never categorize as fun?
The tone of Twin Peaks, the original, is very much primetime soap opera. When we had those primetime soap operas in the late 80s, early 90s, Twin
Hmm.
Peaks is a I'm not going to say it's a parody because it's not a parody. It is a good soap opera, but is also kind of playing with the conventions of the soap opera. So if you were to watch the first season, which you could say, which is like to most Twin Peaks fans, I would say most of us would agree that the first season is perfect, and then the second season is where there's a dip. Um, you would definitely not be seeing the kind of things you're seeing in Firewalk with Me. You're not seeing certainly the violence or the horror. You're mostly seeing a sort of purposely arch or campy sort of riff on primetime soap operas. When you get into Twin Peaks: The Return,
Hmm.
that's when you really need Firewalk with Me. That's where Twin Peaks: The Return is essentially a sequel to Firewalk with Me.
And then I haven't seen three Lynch movies.
Okay.
I haven't seen The Elephant Man, Dune, or The Straight Story. Uh, Based on my top three, which one of those should I watch first?
You should watch The Straight Story. Just knowing you as I do,
Mhm.
regardless of your Lynch top 10 or your top three or whatever, I would think I think you would love The Straight Story. I think this because I mean you understand what that right.
Yeah.
The Straight Story is just it's not Lynchy at all. It's just two friends. Elephant Man is a film I respect more than I like. It's not a movie I watch that often. It's Lynch. It's Lynch doing his like, okay, I made a really remarkable first film, and now they're giving me some money, so let me make something
Mhm.
that's studio friendly. I think it's good, but it's not in my top Lynch movies. And then Dune is like, if you like the book and you like David Lynch, you'll get a kick out of the movie. The movie is big and weird, and it's doing its best. It's not a success in most measures. I think that Villeneuve's at least his part one, is a much
Mhm.
better adaptation. But Lynch's movie is still doing something stylistically fun that I think you would enjoy. So I would say Straight Story, Dune, and then Elephant Man. Elephant Man is homework.
All right, so this was great. I love this movie. It was such a treat to like go back and watch it. I hadn't seen it in a long time. I stand as it's it's got to be the best movie of the 2000s for me. I know it's like Zodiac and that's kind of is back and forth for me, but I just think I like Mulholland Drive just a hair better.
Yeah,
But
sure. Yeah, I mean, I definitely, Zodiac is up there too. I just rewatched that the other day. But no, Mulholland Drive in my heart will always be number one.
all right, so we will be back next week with another one of Rob's favorite movies, and special guest Rosalie Lewis will be joining us, and we're going to be talking about Rob Reiner in the middle of his incredible run at the beginning of his directorial career, and The Princess Bride. So until next time, these seeds
Our Silencio.